Carter stopped talking to me the week after I started posting photos as Lauren online. No explanation. Just silence where there used to be daily texts and weekend plans, and the kind of friendship that felt like coming home. My name is Josh Kennedy, and I've been best friends with Carter Williams since we were 14. 15 years of shared history. Of knowing each other's secrets and dreams and fears. Of being closer than brothers ever were. Until I became Lauren. I'd been cross-dressing privately for years, but something changed last spring. I got tired of hiding. Tired of only existing as Lauren in my apartment with the curtains drawn. So I created an Instagram account and started sharing photos. Nothing provocative. Just me in dresses looking happy and real. The response was overwhelming. Supportive comments from other cross-dressers. Messages from people saying my photos helped them feel less alone. For the first time, Lauren existed beyond my bedroom mirror. Carter found the account because I was stupid enough to use my actual last name. Kennedy wasn't exactly uncommon, but he'd always been good at finding me online. The photos only showed Lauren, but he must have recognized my apartment. He never mentioned finding the account. Just started pulling away. Canceled plans. Responded to texts with one-word answers. Started posting photos with other friends doing things we used to do together. I tried calling him to talk about it, but he never picked up. Tried showing up at his apartment, but he claimed he was busy. After 3 weeks of silence, I gave up trying to force a conversation he clearly didn't want to have. Then I saw him at the bar. It was a Friday night, and I was out as Lauren for the first time publicly. My friend John had convinced me to come to this LGBT-friendly place downtown where I could be myself without judgment. I was nervous but excited. Ready to let Lauren exist in the real world instead of just online. Carter was there with some girl I didn't recognize. Sitting at a corner table laughing at something on her phone. He looked happy. Relaxed. Like he hadn't spent the past month ignoring his best friend. Our eyes met across the room and something flickered in his expression. Recognition maybe. Or shock. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned back to his date like I didn't exist. It shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. We weren't dating. Weren't anything except friends who used to be inseparable. But watching him pretend not to know me felt like being erased. I tried to enjoy my night. Danced with John. Talked to strangers who complimented my dress. But I kept glancing at Carter's table. Kept catching him looking at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Around 11, a guy approached me at the bar. Tall and handsome with an easy smile. He introduced himself as Henry and asked if he could buy me a drink. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing important. He was flirty and charming and clearly interested. When Henry asked for my number, I hesitated. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I could feel Carter's eyes burning into my back from across the room. When I looked over, he was staring directly at us with an expression I couldn't read. Anger maybe. Or something else. I gave Henry my number anyway. Watched Carter stand up abruptly and leave the bar without saying goodbye to his date. She sat there looking confused while I tried to understand what just happened. The next morning, Carter finally called me. First time in a month. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. He wanted to meet. Needed to talk. We agreed on the coffee shop near his apartment where we'd spent countless hours over the years. Carter looked terrible when he walked in. Tired and stressed, and not at all like the confident guy I'd seen at the bar the night before. We ordered coffee and sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before he finally spoke. He'd found my Instagram account 3 weeks ago. Saw the photos of Lauren. Saw me looking happy and beautiful and completely different from the Josh he'd known for 15 years. It confused him. Made him question things he thought he understood about our friendship. About himself. The past month he'd been avoiding me because he didn't know how to process what he was feeling. Didn't know how to separate the jealousy from the attraction, from the fear that everything between us was changing. Jealousy. That word hung between us like smoke. He wasn't jealous because I was cross-dressing. He was jealous because other people got to see Lauren and he didn't. Because strangers online got to appreciate this version of me that he'd never known existed. Because some random guy at a bar got to flirt with me while Carter sat across the room pretending not to care. He'd brought a date to that bar specifically because he knew I was going to be there. John had posted about it earlier and Carter saw it and decided to show up with some woman from his gym just to prove he didn't care. Except he did care. Cared so much that watching Henry talk to me made him physically ill with jealousy. I sat there trying to process his confession. My straight best friend was jealous. Over me. Over Lauren. Over the attention I was getting from other men. The thing about Carter was he'd never been good at understanding his own feelings. He'd dated dozens of women over the years, but nothing ever lasted. He'd blame them for being too clingy or too distant or too something. Never examined why he kept running from relationships that should have worked. Now he was sitting across from me admitting that seeing me as Lauren had broken something open inside him. Made him realize that maybe the reason he'd never been able to commit to anyone was because he'd already committed to me 15 years ago without realizing it. He wasn't attracted to men. Had no interest in Josh in a romantic or sexual way. But Lauren was different. Lauren was feminine and beautiful, and the parts of me he'd never allowed himself to notice until I literally put them on display. He knew it didn't make sense. Knew that Lauren and Josh were the same person. But his brain couldn't reconcile the friend he'd grown up with and the woman he'd seen at that bar. So instead of dealing with it, he'd run away like he always did when feelings got complicated. I asked him what he wanted from me. What this confession was supposed to accomplish. We couldn't go back to how things were before. Lauren existed now. She wasn't going back into hiding just to make Carter comfortable with his unexamined feelings. He didn't want me to hide. He wanted permission to stop hiding himself. To admit that seeing me happy as Lauren made him happy too. That the jealousy wasn't really jealousy at all. It was fear of losing me to someone who might understand Lauren better than he did. We spent 3 hours in that coffee shop talking through 15 years of unspoken feelings. About how our friendship had always been more intense than normal friendships. More possessive. More dependent. How we'd both dated other people but always came back to each other as the primary relationship in our lives. Carter asked if he could see me as Lauren sometime. Not across a crowded bar, but up close where we could talk honestly about what any of this meant. The following week Carter came over while I was dressed as Lauren. He brought flowers which felt absurdly formal and sweet. We sat on my couch and talked like we used to before everything got complicated. The conversation flowed easily once the initial awkwardness passed. He told me I looked sexy. Not in a creepy way, but in the way you tell someone something obvious that still needs to be said. I told him he looked tired and he laughed and said he'd been losing sleep over me for weeks. We ended up kissing. Neither of us planned it, but it happened naturally like it had been inevitable all along. When we pulled apart, Carter looked terrified and relieved at the same time. 2 years later, Carter and I are still together. Still figuring out what our relationship means. He identifies as straight still because he's only attracted to my feminine presentation. Josh is his best friend. Lauren is his girlfriend. Somehow I've become both to him. Last month we were at his parents' house for dinner. His mom pulled me aside while Carter was helping his dad with something in the garage. She wanted to show me something in her bedroom. Led me upstairs to her closet and pulled out a photo album. The pictures inside were from the 70s. A young man with long hair wearing bell-bottoms and flowing shirts. Makeup and jewelry that pushed the boundaries of masculine presentation. In every photo he looked happy and free. It was Carter's father. Before he became the conservative businessman who now lectured about traditional values at family dinners. Carter's mom explained that her husband used to be different. Used to express himself in ways that made people uncomfortable. Then his own father died and he inherited the family business and decided he needed to become someone respectable. Someone serious. Someone who fit expectations. She'd watched her husband bury that part of himself for 40 years. Watched him become bitter and rigid and judgmental about anything that challenged his carefully constructed masculine image. Carter's mom handed me the photo album. Told me to show it to Carter. To let him understand that his father's anger wasn't really about Lauren at all. It was about seeing his son brave enough to love someone who refused to hide the way he'd hidden for decades. A straight man got jealous over me when I cross-dressed. But the real story wasn't about jealousy or attraction or sexuality that didn't fit neat labels. It was about how we inherit fear from the people who raised us. How we repeat their patterns until someone loves us enough to break the cycle. Carter's jealousy wasn't about losing me to someone else. It was about recognizing himself in me. About seeing the parts of himself he'd learned to hide reflected in someone who refused to keep hiding. Sometimes the people who react most strongly to our authenticity are the ones who wish they had the courage to be authentic themselves. If you enjoyed this story, you can find more like it in my Femboy and Crossdressing Stories bundle. 5 complete stories available now on Amazon for just $4.99. Until next time, keep exploring, feeling, and becoming who you are.